Joining us now is Michael Greiner from Oakland University School of Business Administration for our weekly market talk. Plenty going on once again in the last several days since we last spoke, Michael. And let's begin with what's going on at the federal level as regulators are starting to clamp down on Ticketmaster and Google and other large organizations, particularly those that are providing concert and other event tickets, something that was bringing up quite the controversy a few months ago as Taylor Swift's tour tickets went on sale, and a lot of people took out a second mortgage.
Good way to put it. You know, it's kind of interesting to see that Taylor Swift is one person who can bring together both the Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill. But that's exactly what happened. And they had a hearing last week where they essentially grilled the leadership of Live Nation, which is the parent company of Live Nation Entertainment, as well as Ticketmaster. And the issue is this, is that Live Nation basically provides the artists for some of these venues, while Ticketmaster kind of gets these contracts with these different venues to sell their tickets. So the concern is that Ticketmaster is basically using the threat of not providing some of these artists to some of these venues if they don't use them to sell their tickets. And there were claims that, oh, we've resolved this, it shouldn't be a problem. But then it came up that it was a problem. And so actually there was a court-ordered settlement to continue oversight of this acquisition, which occurred in about 2010. So it's not quite clear how that's working. And you know, one thing that can't be understated is really just the threats, the fear that there is that some of these venues could be left out from some of these high-profile tours is really something that they're concerned with. And they have these relationships that they develop with people. So to be fair, I think that the feds have a real legitimate concern here. And to take the side of the Swifties on that, I do agree that probably Ticketmaster and Live Nation do have a monopoly that they're probably abusing. You have to remember, though, there's nothing wrong with developing a monopoly within an industry just because of the fact that you have a good product and everybody wants to use it. The problem arises when you use your strong position in one industry to essentially take over another industry. And that's kind of what they're claiming Live Nation is doing with using its strength with the artists then to kind of keep out competitors from the ticket selling space. And we see also a lawsuit that was filed against Google. This one talks about their advertising approach. And of course, Google is incredibly profitable, largely because of advertising. In fact, one of the questions I always ask my students is, what business is Google in? And, you know, inevitably some will say, oh, it's in the search engine business. Oh, it's in the internet business, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, someone will fall on the fact that actually Google is in the advertising business, and that's the business that they actually make money at. Everything else is basically just oriented as a way for them to make money in advertising. Well, as it turns out, what Google has done is that they've also bought up a lot of the companies that basically support the process of advertising. So, for example, there are companies that allow the payments for advertising, and other companies that will essentially distribute advertisements then on other websites. And Google, as it turns out, has bought up a lot of those through their parent company, Alphabet. And so the concern is, again, that because of their dominant position then as the dominant player in advertising on the internet, then they're able to essentially buy up these other companies that then make it harder for new competitors to enter into this industry. So that's really what the FTC is trying to do and the Justice Department is trying to do right now. And the concern is this, and this is really where we're seeing some innovation here in antitrust law, which is that typically courts have looked for there to be some kind of impact on consumers, that consumers are paying a higher price as a result of this antitrust activity. And that's where these lawsuits have typically succeeded. But now what the Justice Department and the FTC are trying to do is say, wait a minute, it's not just about the consumers. What it's done is it's impacted either innovation in new industries or consumer choice. These are things that might not directly be reflected in the price that consumers are paying, but still have an impact in creating an environment where there's not so much competition and not so much dynamism for our economy.
And just to go back to some of the issues with Ticketmaster, because there was a hearing earlier this week in committee in the Senate. where Senator Tom Kennedy from Louisiana, Republican, had proposed even some perhaps regulation should be put in place on resale of these tickets, because we saw when the Taylor Swift tour, when those tickets went on sale, a lot of the reason why people had trouble getting tickets is because you had bots that were buying hundreds, if not thousands, of these tickets and then attempting to resell them for even more inflated prices later on. And so, these anti-heroes causing a lot of bad blood that regulators now are trying to shake off. And what really can be done at the federal level to address some of these issues, particularly on the resale, given that these are independent companies? But like you mentioned, that partnership really where the antitrust problem comes into play is between that relationship with Live Nation and Ticketmaster, not necessarily in some of the ways that Ticketmaster does its selling of the tickets.
Yeah, I actually agree with your point here. And as an economist, I really chafed when I saw that suggestion that somehow there should be some restriction on the resale of tickets, because that's a market, and if we believe in free markets here in the United States, then when somebody has something that they can sell at a profit, they should be able to sell it. That's kind of the way the free markets work. And I found it interesting that you had a conservative Republican senator suggesting that, where typically they've taken the position that we should give some deference to free markets. And here he is saying that somehow we should restrict one that's really a very much a free market. I'd say that the bigger issues here that the feds can step in are twofold. Number one, what Ticketmaster has done, ironically, is in addition to selling the tickets, they've actually established themselves as a major player then in the resale market. So, for example, if you buy a ticket and want to resell your ticket, frequently you'll go through Ticketmaster to do that. That they kind of provide the medium that through which you're able to resell your ticket to others, oftentimes at a profit. And the biggest place now, I think, that most people go to purchase their resold tickets, they'll scalped tickets, as it's put, is through Ticketmaster itself. So that's kind of ironic there. And it makes you wonder if that seems a little bit odd, that you have kind of both ends of the spectrum being controlled by one company. And then again, the issue with them having control of Live Nation. And really what the issue is this, is that although it might not directly translate into higher costs for consumers, although my guess is it probably does, it's just hard to prove in court. But what it certainly does is it limits innovation, is it limits new ideas coming into the space. And could this situation with Ticketmaster and the sale of Taylor Swift tickets been handled better? Possibly. Probably, had there been a company that really decided they were going to try to innovate in the space and come up with some new technology that might make things more easier to deal with. And given the fact, though, that Ticketmaster has such control over this market and is able then to kind of keep out potential competitors with their control of Live Nation, then as a result of it, they really don't have an incentive then to innovate in this one space. So that's really what the issue is. And I think that what's more interesting is talk among some of the senators that really we need to start talking about maybe breaking up Ticketmaster and Live Nation, that Live Nation should perhaps be a separate company. And is it really appropriate then also that Ticketmaster is also then a player in the resale of tickets, that maybe those should also be separate companies? So I think that really the bigger solution would be some type of effort to try to break up the company. But of course, that's something that the company will fight tooth and nail.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure being put on Ticketmaster and on Live Nation and their operations. We've seen these sort of breakups be forced before by the federal government in these antitrust cases, whether it be in way back in radio and in television and certainly in film on multiple occasions to prevent from these sort of monopolizing of different parts of the industry. And so tons of pressure being put on Ticketmaster at this time. And they really wish they could go back to December. That's the end of my Taylor Swift puns for today. We'll move on.
I think they really regret what happened. I think you're right about that.
Absolutely. So we'll move on. There's some good signs out in the economy after about 6 months of a lot of ups and downs. Inflation may be taking a little bit of a cool down from where it has been at its peak. And even with Walmart raising some of its wages too, that could be another good sign for our economy. Just how much of a cooling may inflation be going through, if it is at all, and what sort of good signs are out there that maybe we're turning a corner here?
Yeah, this is once again kind of the interesting story of this economy, which is that pretty much everybody, when you look at the surveys, thinks the economy is doing badly. But when you look at the data, there's a lot of good, positive information out there right now. And in fact, we just received more good news yesterday when it turned out that the economy over the last quarter grew by a 2.9% increase to the gross domestic product when you annualize that amount. That means that over the last two quarters, basically the third and fourth quarters of last year, the economy actually grew at an annualized rate of above 3%, which is really very healthy for an economy our size. So once again, it seems like we're getting all this good news, and certainly in terms of inflation, we've been talked about this before, where it appears that inflation is slowing down pretty dramatically. It depends upon which indicator you look at, but certainly when you take into consideration certain ways of measuring the housing costs, that we might actually be getting close to the 2% inflation rate that the Fed wants to see. But there's so much at play in this economy that's so huge that you never know how one thing's going to affect another. Like, for example, we keep hearing from some of these tech giants that they're laying off people. And in fact, there's been an indication that there's been as much as 800,000 layoffs that have been announced by some of these larger companies. And that might seem like a lot, and indeed it is. But then when you look at the numbers more deeply, you find out the fact that, in fact, among tech workers, the unemployment rate is about 2%. So these tech workers are going to be reemployed very quickly. And what's more is that while these larger companies have been engaging in some layoffs, at the same time, small to medium-sized enterprises, SMEs as we call them, have actually been hiring at a rate far in excess of what these companies have been laying off. So while there might have been as many as 800,000 layoffs announced by these companies, at the same time, these small and medium-sized companies are increasing their employment by as much as 3.5 million. It's kind of one of those things that each time you get a piece of bad news, then there's some piece of good news that outweighs it. And the Walmart announcement that we just saw that they're going to be increasing the minimum wage that they are paying their employees essentially from $12 an hour up to $14 an hour, and that on average that will raise the wages that they pay their employees company wide by about 50 cents per hour, from about $17 on average to about $17.50 per hour on average. Again, this is kind of a good news, bad news. On the one hand, it shows that the employment market is still hot. People can still get jobs, even though we hear about these layoffs. Walmart is significant because, of course, Walmart is the nation's largest private employer, with, I believe, 1.3 million employees. So they're a huge employer. And when they make a move in the labor market, it's going to have impact far beyond just what their company does. And what's more is, though, on the other hand, it kind of says that, well, is this going to be something then that drives inflation a little bit more and pushes the Fed to increase interest rates a little bit more? Because, of course, that's what then slows down the economy. And in fact, next week, and we'll probably be talking about this next Friday, next week, the Fed's going to be meeting again to talk about their latest increase in the interest rates. And the expectation is that probably they're not going to do another 0.5% increase the way they've been doing for the past number of months, but it might be a 0.25% increase because they want to kind of slow things down and see how they're impacting the economy. But, again, we get these indications that the economy is still hot, even though there's all this talk about, doom and gloom. We have all these problems here. And then you come with, Walmart increasing their wages and something that indicates that they still have faith in the American economy and that they're going to be putting even more money into people's pockets, which then boosts up the economy some more. And that the economy was growing faster than people expected. And that the unemployment rate is still at really a historic low. All these things are positive indications, and really it shows what a challenging job the Fed has right now to try to manage this. Have we turned the corner on inflation? Probably the consensus is yes, we have at this point. But how fast it's going to go down back to normal rates and how long it's going to take for us to get there, that's still a debate. And pretty much whatever economist you talk to, they're going to give you a different answer.
Yeah, it seems to be that instead of trying to prevent that free fall from happening and providing that last little bit of support, now it's more of just easing it back down into a sense of
Yep.
normal from our government's point of view. Just another couple minutes with you, Michael, before we'll have to say goodbye
Yep.
for this week. I do want to go over, the latest with our favorite guy in this segment, Elon Musk, and what's going on with him.
Yes.
Not on the Twitter side this time. This time it's back in his old house at Tesla, where some controversy with him potentially trying to have taken his company from public back to private, and issues with some of those investors. What's been going on with that?
Yeah, some of you may remember this. This was a big story back in 2018 when he tweeted out. This was, of course, before he owned Twitter, but he tweeted out that was considering taking Tesla private at 420, meaning at $420 per share, and that he had secured the financing for it. Well, shortly thereafter, then he changed his tune and said, "Oh no, I really am not going to do that." Now the problem is $420 a share was more than Tesla was trading for at the time on the open market. So as a result of that, you had a lot of investors who said, "Hey, this is a great opportunity for us to get a big Tesla at a bargain. So we're going to buy Tesla with the understanding that it's probably going to be sold in the relative near future at $420 a share. So if we get it at less than $420 a share, it's a good investment." Well, the problem is, it turns out that when Elon Musk made that announcement, he probably did not have financing for it. And that brings us to what is considered fraud. Now, fraud is basically when you lie about something and you know you're lying about something, and you say it anyway, and it hurts other people. Well, in this case, it appears that he was stating an untruth when he said that he had financing for this, because he claims that he had an agreement with interestingly enough, the Saudis. This is the same fund that had generated some controversy when they invested $2 billion in Jared Kushner, former presidential advisor, in his fund. But as it turns out, though, the more research that's being done, the more it seems that the Saudis really had not committed to investing in Elon Musk's approach of taking Tesla private. And by private, I mean taking it so it's no longer traded on the stock market. It would instead be controlled by a small group of people, probably headed by Elon Musk. So as a result of that, it appears that these people who made this investment based upon this information, then the stock price collapsed and they lost a lot of money on that trade. Well, that appears to be fraud. And as it turns out, the judge has already granted motions by the plaintiffs in favor of their action. So Elon Musk, really, a lot of his defenses have already been closed out. And really, the only one that's left to him right now is that the people didn't lose their money specifically because of the things he tweeted. That if there's some other reason that they lost their money, then he might escape liability. But the truth of the matter is, I'd say he's got a tough case to make, and he stands to have to pay out another couple $100 million potentially to these plaintiffs, which is going to be one more issue that he's going to be struggling with, as he's been dealing with all his troubles at Twitter. And of course, he's got other legal issues going on at Tesla right now. So it's just Elon Musk all the time, it seems. He's just always got something going.
Yeah, we'll have plenty more to talk about him next week when he does something else that will make the news, and all of the other things happening in our markets across the U.S. and around the world. Michael, thanks as always for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here, Tyler.